While he is yet to be officially activated, all signs are pointing to Abraham Lucas finally returning to the starting lineup for the Seahawks up front. How much can Big Abe help Seattle's offense as a whole? We'll be breaking it down in a special edition Blue Wednesday episode of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on this special edition Blue Wednesday episode by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in Meridian, Idaho, or overseas in Germany. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Like we do every day before game day, we are going to be diving into our keys to victory, dishing out a game plan for a Seahawks win in Dallas. We'll have our picks to click, game predictions, and much more, courtesy of our friends at Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The Seahawks have not started their full offensive line since the season opener. There's at least a chance that that is finally going to change on Thursday night against the Cowboys. Abraham Lucas, a full participant in practice yesterday, according to Pete Carroll. He is on schedule. He's looked good this week. He's been able to get through the work without any setbacks. So all signs are pointing to Lucas being activated before Thursday's game and starting at right tackle, which is obviously huge news for the Seattle Seahawks. And as I mentioned, they have not had their full starting lineup on the offensive line since the season opener, with him out since that point. And this has been a football team that has certainly missed him at right tackle. And it feels like they've missed him a lot more in recent weeks than they did early in the season.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the stats, it bears it out completely, looking at, how much they need Abe Lucas. So it's really great that he was a full participant in practice this week. And if the Seahawks have any, visions of containing, slowing, mildly inconveniencing Micah Parsons, Abraham Lucas needs to hit the ground running. And coming back is huge. He had a 69.0 pass block grade last year. He allowed one pressure. I kind of did a little, math here. And last year, he allowed one pressure every 22.6 pass blocking snaps. Stone Forsythe this year has allowed a pressure every 10.2 snaps. So less than half the amount of snaps to allow pressure than Lucas last season. So really, that paints the picture of just the impact that Abe Lucas can bring. And obviously with this game coming up, I mean, the Cowboys is about as fierce as any front seven, especially defensive line, that you're going to face in the NFL. So having Abe Lucas back, and, you can't, it's going to be hard to expect him to go right in and just completely shut down Micah Parsons and company completely. But having him in the fold can only increase your chances of success. Like that stat. I mean, it just, he allowed a snap or a pressure in twice as many snaps as they took twice as many snaps to allow pressure as Forsythe. So that's a huge upgrade.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this a lot on this podcast over the years. I only put so much stock in PFF grades. That's very subjective. But what I do look at is the advanced stats that Pro Football Focus has. And the one, when it comes to pass blocking, that I look at most closely is pass blocking efficiency rate. And Stone Forsythe and Jake Curhan among qualified tackles rank 77 and 78th out of 81 tackles in that metric. So they have both struggled. They are under 94%. And even Jason Peters, who I feel like has played solid in the starts that he's had the last couple of weeks for the Seahawks, got a little banged up last week. His pass protection efficiency rate is still under 95%. And to me, it needs to be above 97% for you to be even viewed as an average tackle. If you have a smaller sample size, then obviously that's going to impact things a little bit. And all three of these guys have started games, but this has certainly been an issue. And I don't want to sugarcoat this. It's just one offensive lineman, but Abraham Lucas coming back is an absolute game changer if he is fully healthy and he is ready to go. We got to see what he looks like on the game field. I think the Seahawks have been smart to be cautious here. They didn't rush him back into game action. They've gotten him some practice work here the last couple of weeks. So I'm excited to see what he looks like. But as far as how much he can move the needle for this offense, you pointed out some stats. Here's a few others that show you just how much Abraham Lucas could really be a game changer for this team. At right tackle, 38.2% of the pressures that Geno Smith has had this year, according to PFF, have come from the right tackle position. And that is since week 2 when Lucas came out of the lineup. That is the highest mark in the league by almost 5%, with, ironically, Dak Prescott being second on that list with 34% coming from the right tackle position. They've given up 59 pressures, and they've given up 8 sacks collectively as a group. And I'm not going to just sit here and bash the 3 guys that have started in place of Abraham Lucas. You expected there was going to be a drop-off in play. Stone Forsythe and Jay Curhan, they're not starters for a reason. They're solid swing guys. Jason Peters is a future Hall of Famer, but he's 41 years old. You just needed these guys to get you through to whenever Abe Lucas could get back on the field. And I think for the most part that these guys have done that. But we have seen the play dip off with all 3 of these guys as they've gotten multiple starts and teams have gotten some film on them. They've had more trouble collectively as a group. And so getting number 72 back out there absolutely is a big deal. I don't know if you can quantify how much this is going to improve the offense, but if your pass protection on the right side improves even a slight bit with Lucas in there compared to the other 3 players that have been playing, it does create a little bit more flexibility for Shane Waldron with his playbook to run some of those longer developing routes that have not been hitting in the last several weeks. They might be able to hit on some of those plays if Geno Smith has a little bit more time and he's not getting quick pressure off the right side like he did a ton against the 49ers last Thursday night.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about the comfort level, perhaps, that the play calling could expand with Abe Lucas in tow. So having him, yeah, like we said, is a huge boon. Just other quick notes as well. Phil Haynes out with a toe. I think you and I can both agree. Anthony Bradford seems like the future at guard there. So, if Phil Haynes isn't 100%, I'd say Anthony Bradford's got to get the starts there. Just a few other nicks and bruises. Leonard Williams got moved up to limited. Jamal Adams resting. It kind of feels like they kind of kept him out last week to really, they kind of rested him that one game in the Rams to really get him going for this stretch run here. Hopefully he's ready to go. So a few other minor bumps and bruises, but really the big story is Abe Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas is clearly going to be the headliner in this injury report. And I will say this, Ken Walker III, Pete Carroll didn't rule him out yesterday, but if you were parsing through his words, I would be stunned if Ken Walker III is on the field tomorrow. I'm expecting him to miss a second consecutive game. Maybe they get him back when they have a week and a half, this mini bye they're going to have coming up before the rematch with the 49ers. Maybe they get him back for week 14, but that oblique injury, it doesn't sound like he has made much progress since he suffered it. So I would be really, really surprised if he is out there. But aside from that, if Phil Haynes has a chance to maybe play, Abe Lucas, I'd be really surprised if he's not out there. Everything is pointing to him being activated and starting for the Seahawks tomorrow night. So overall, it's a pretty encouraging injury report. They got lucky coming out of that game last week. They didn't have too many injuries they had to worry about. Jason Peters exited the game, but sounds like he's doing okay. He has not been on the injury report beyond being a full participant early in the week. So they are liking where they're at right now with this team in terms of injuries. But we'll see what ends up happening because the Dallas Cowboys are pretty healthy too. They've got most of their guys ready to go heading into this game on Thursday night as well. We are going to get to our keys to victory coming up next year on our Blue Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, it's just you with more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. And now that we've got basketball season here, you can do combo projections with football and basketball players from the Specials League. For example, I can have Steph Curry and Tyler Lockett at 10.5 three-pointers plus receptions. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that if your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. And Prize Picks is an absolute blast each week. It's super easy to enjoy daily fantasy without any hassle and land quick winnings. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code LockedInNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. This episode is also brought your way by DoorDash. Why root for your team on an empty stomach? That is a game day travesty that ensures you won't be cheering at your maximum ability. Order on DoorDash and save on a football watch party favorite. Get up to 50% off on a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order on the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKEDON23 or LOCK23. When I'm kicking back and watching the game with friends and family, I love to order Jet City Pizza. It is my favorite gluten-free pizza place in the Seattle region. Got to make sure to have a 2-liter root beer as well. And DoorDash makes the process easy, so I don't have to leave the comfort of my couch for delicious, great-tasting food before and after kickoff. It's so simple. I've ordered Jet City off the DoorDash app so much, the people who manage the restaurant know me by name. Ready to satisfy your taste buds on game day? Quench those cravings with your favorite local restaurants at DoorDash. Get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCK23. Subject to change, terms apply. You're listening to Blue Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure to check out Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Seahawks will look to get back in the win column. It's been a rough stretch here, losing 3 of their last 4 games. Things are not going to get any easier in terms of opponents. However, the Dallas Cowboys coming in with an 8-3 record. This team is flying high. Number 1 scoring offense, number 4 scoring defense. This team is loaded on both sides of the football. So the Seahawks are 9-point underdogs going into this game. Nick, let's devise a game plan for a Seahawks victory. And this one's certainly going to be tricky because the Cowboys have a great record. They're a really good team. But it is worth noting they have not beaten anybody with more than 4 wins this year. So this is a football team that's had some trouble stepping up to the plate against better football teams. Maybe the Seahawks can use that as a little bit of momentum to get in this game, have a chance to win. On offense, what's the first thing that jumps out to you that the Seahawks absolutely must do to have any shot to win at AT&T Stadium?
Yeah, I know the Cowboys have struggled against, the cream of the crop of the NFL. Unfortunately, I don't consider the Seahawks at this moment to be the cream of the crop, so we'll see. And you said tricky for the game plan. I would use the word aggressive. I think it's going to be an aggressive keys to victory because that's kind of where it needs to go in order to secure a victory against the Dallas Cowboys in Dallas, Thursday Night Football, the whole thing. Hoping the throwback uniforms provided some good juju as well. But for me, I was looking back at how many times this year the Seahawks had a drive of at least 9 plays. That's just, the 3 and outs are, of course, really frustrating. You want sustained drives. I know, it's kind of not a perfect stat, obviously, because you can score before 9 plays, but it's just one of those things where if you're having consistently 9, 10 plus play drives, you're sustaining drives, you're getting first downs, you're converting third downs, you're getting in the red zone, those things like that. The Seahawks have had 5 games this year where they have at least 3 drives of 9 plus plays. I think this is a game where you got to win the time of possession battle and get 4 or more drives of at least 9 plus plays. Because the Seahawks are 4-1 when they get 3 of those kind of drives this year in each game. So 5 times it's happened. They're 4-1, and they're 2-4 when they get 2 or less 9+ play drives in a game. So that kind of does lend to believe that it's pretty obvious once the Seahawks can get sustained drives, find a rhythm on offense, especially in the second half. A lot of those 9+ play drives did not occur in the second half. And also, on the flip side, the Seahawks are 29th in average time of possession on offense per drive. The Cowboys are number 1. So it is a huge, turning point to win that time of possession battle and sustain drives.
Yeah, you're looking for more of a macro approach. I'm going to look from a micro approach here for my first big point here in the game plan. I think the Seahawks need to get at least 10 targets to Jackson Smith-Njigba and the tight end group. And that might seem really aggressive because the Seahawks have not been leaning heavily on Smith-Njigba, and the tight end group has hardly been noticed in the passing game. But the reason why I'm making the argument that this has got to be a crucial part of this game plan, Nick, the Cowboys have a really good defense. Micah Parsons up front, DeMarcus Lawrence, all the weapons they have in that defensive line. Right now, DaRon Bland is the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year, in my opinion, with 5 interceptions returned for touchdowns. They've got other good players in secondary, but this team they've had their issues with defending slot receivers. They have been one of the worst defenses in the league defending the slot. Jordan Lewis is their primary slot corner. He has given up 324 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 131 passer rating this year in his coverage snaps from the slot, according to Pro Football Focus. You watch the tape and you can see that receivers and tight ends have been able to take advantage of him. The Seahawks, from a game planning perspective, have to see that on the tape, and you've got to go into attack mode against the slots. Now, DaRon Bland has 2 of his interceptions playing in the slot. So if he's in there, Geno Smith needs to know that he is there. He needs to keep eyes on him every single play. But Jordan Lewis in particular, if you can get him isolated in the slot against Jackson Smith-Njigba, even the tight ends, those should be the guys getting the wealth of your targets early. And I think that can force the issue schematically for Dan Quinn and maybe open up some things for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf as the game goes on.
Yeah, they had that group you mentioned had 7 targets against San Francisco. You can't just rely on hero ball with Lockett and DK. At some point, if the Seahawks want to get serious about improving their offense and having, dangerous, threatening offense, they got to involve the tight ends. Jackson Smith-Njigba needs to continue his improving. For me, the number 3 is, once again, I had this, I think, a few weeks ago when they were playing really tough teams, is not only win the turnover battle, don't even have a turnover. No giveaways whatsoever on offense for the Seahawks. Because, you're dealing with DaRon Bland, who has more or as many defensive touchdowns as DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith-Njigba have offensive touchdowns combined. So he's a guy that's aggressive. He wants to take the ball away, and he's not the only one. They're a turnover-minded defense. They want to play offense with their defense and score. So you cannot give them those opportunities. I'm saying spotless, turnover-free football. Dallas is 4-0 when they get multiple turnovers this year, and the Seahawks, even just turning it over once, are 3-4 when they do so, and 3-0 when they play turnoverless football. So 3-1, when they play turnoverless football. So therein lies the formula.
Yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, the Seahawks are going to have an even bigger challenge. You're dealing with the number 1 scoring offense. If I had to vote for MVP right now, it would be Dak Prescott. The way that he is playing right now, he has been lights out since week 6, a QBR above 80. No other quarterback in the league is above a 68 during that time. So he has been head and shoulders above everybody else. CeeDee Lamb's having a phenomenal season. This is an outstanding offensive line. So the Seahawks are going to have to worry about that. The other thing that's notable is this Cowboys team is in the top 5 in third down conversion rate on offense and on defense. And so they've been able to sustain drives. They've been able to move the chains. And that's one of the big reasons they are the number 1 scoring offense. They stay on the field. They convert. For the Seahawks to have any shot to win this game, they have got to keep the Cowboys under 40% in the third down conversion rate. Get some quick stops, force some punts, hopefully get a few 3-and-outs in this game so that you can keep your defense fresh, get the ball back to your offense, and hope that they are able to sustain drives, as we mentioned. But if the Cowboys are hovering in that 50 to 60% or higher percentage rate on third down conversions with the weapons they have, this feels like an insurmountable statistic. To me, is the most important one. Aside from maybe turnovers, they have got to find a way to get some quick stops and avoid giving up too many conversions on third down.
And that kind of bleeds into my point on defense, which you got to limit Dallas under 100 rushing yards. You just have to. They're 7-1 when they get to the 100-yard mark, 100-yard rushing mark. They're 0-2 actually when they're held under 90. I know that's quite a tall task for the Seahawks, but the Seahawks have actually done that 4 times this year where they've allowed less than 90 rushing yards. You got Tony Pollard. Rico Dowdle's come on as a decent, change of pace back. Dak Prescott, of course, you and Rob have talking about this earlier in the week, that Dak Prescott can hurt you with his legs. Some combination of that cannot add up to 100 because, yes, that does lead to third down conversions. That leads to sustained drives. Everything you don't want with the Cowboys offense, because if they can run the ball, that means you have to creep in, which means they can get CeeDee Lamb down deep, which is you're playing right into their hands.
Yeah, no question about it. The run game is going to be critical because this is a pass-first football team at Dallas, but they want to pass to open up the run game. And so you got to try to take that away as much as you can and make this a one-dimensional offense if you can, and then try to lock down the receivers, which is much easier said than done. From a turnover standpoint, anytime you're a big underdog, turnovers are equalizers. And I think in this game, you look at the Cowboys, they're 5-0 when they don't turn the ball over this year. They're 3-3 when they've had at least one turnover. They've only had 2 games with multiple turnovers, but I think in this one, playing at home for the Seahawks to be able to get a road upset, I think 2 turnovers and generating at least 10 points off those turnovers. So this is an offense and defensive key. You got to get the turnovers, and then you got to capitalize on them, which has been a major Achilles heel for this team. When they've gotten turnovers, a lot of the time the offense has not been able to put points on the board. You can't do that this game. Create at least 2 turnovers and get at least 10 points off of that. If they're able to do that, those are equalizing stats that can make this game much closer and give the Seahawks a fighting chance to pull off the upset in Arlington. Coming up next, Nick and I are going to dish out our picks to click and our weekly game predictions. Don't go away. You're listening to the Blue Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks, which is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you have to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. When I was a site manager at SI, LinkedIn Jobs was my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates, and they made the process easy and seamless. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. You're listening to the Blue Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined for today's show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure tomorrow to listen in. We will have a game day edition crossover Thursday with Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. More in-depth analysis going into this primetime battle in Arlington. You won't want to miss it. Nick, it is time for our weekly picks to click on offense and defense. And it was another semi-rough game for both of us last week. We've had our issues with our picks to click not clicking. We're hoping to snap that streak this week. So looking from an offensive perspective for the Seahawks, who's the player that you have outlined as your pick to click that you're expecting a big game from on the road in prime time?
Well, on the road in prime time, when the chips are down, you look to your veterans, look to your proven guys to get it done. And that guy's Tyler Lockett for me. He needs to have, he's one of those guys where I need him to have a click game. His season high this year is 94 receiving yards. I think, if the Seahawks are on the winning end of this, I would think Tyler Lockett's probably north of that. I'm going to go 8 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown for Tyler Lockett. This is, again, more manifesting what kind of needs to happen for the Seahawks to win the game, more so than I'm like, I'm not going to put, hard American dollars on this kind of stat line to actually happen. But certainly something that needs to happen is getting your veteran. I know we just talked about, getting everyone else involved, but Tyler Lockett also as a veteran, good connection. He's been in these environments. You got to get him clicking.
I like that you mentioned manifesting one of these things to develop and actually come into real life, because mine is 100% that. I'm going with Zach Charbonnet here. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I do not expect Ken Walker III to be available. Oblique injury still bothering him, but I'm going to go with 14 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown for Zach Charbonnet, who still does not have his first rushing touchdown in the NFL. I felt like last week that he was one of the few bright spots for the Seattle Seahawks. The stat line wasn't great, 3.2 yards per carry, but when you consider the yardage that he got, how he got that yardage, making guys miss, breaking tackles, a ton of yards after contact. The Cowboys are a decent run defense. That is not the strength of their team, though. And if you want to try to slow down Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and the rest of these pass rushers, you've got to have a semblance of a run game, and you've got to stick with it. And so, again, this is me manifesting to Shane Waldron and the football gods alike. Hey, give the ball to Zach Charbonnet at least 14 times. Let's see if we can get that run game going a little bit, take some pressure off Geno Smith in the offensive line, slow down the pass rushers, and maybe, just maybe, you can sustain some drives, getting a solid day running the football. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, as we mentioned, Dak Prescott playing as well as anybody in the NFL right now. CeeDee Lamb's having an outstanding season. They got other capable receivers. They got a couple really good tight ends as well. Jake Ferguson leading the way in his second season out of Wisconsin, second of the team at targets. Who is your pick to click for the Seahawks to try to slow down this high-powered offense?
Well, it's something that you talked about in your matchup breakdown with Rob. And for me, it's going to be a guy who I think is going to be asked to tackle Dak Prescott when he's scrambling, kind of spy him a little bit. Also, Jake Ferguson, the tight end, is a pretty good tight end. Maybe give him some trouble. And I think that's Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams actually had one of his better games of the season against the 49ers, kind of low key there. Obviously, some of that in garbage time, but he had his best, tackling grade day, one of his better coverage days as far as, or one of the better overall defense or run defense days as far as Pro Football Focus goes. So I'm going to give him 7 tackles, a tackle for loss, and even a sack in there, his first sack of the year. I think he's long overdue. He hasn't had a sack since 2020. He has not had a sack since 2020 now, which is a little crazy. I know that's, all the injuries have piled up, but it's time for Jamal Adams to get back in the sack column. And again, another manifesting, if the Seahawks want to, come out victorious, Jamal Adams needs to have a big day.
I'm staying in the secondary, but I'm going to go with Trey Brown. And here's my rationale behind this. I think Devin Witherspoon's going to get a lot of matchups against CeeDee Lamb, and Dak Prescott's not going to be afraid to test Witherspoon, but I think he's going to go other directions more often than he has in earlier games this year. And I think he's going to test Trey Brown going up against either Michael Gallup or Brandon Cooks. He's going to take his shots. And I think that Trey Brown is going to rise to the occasion, not being too far away from where he played his college ball in Oklahoma. I think he's going to have a big game. I've got him down for 7 tackles and interception. Prescott's only thrown 6 of them this year. Last year, he was among league leaders. This year, with Brian Schottenheimer calling the plays, he has significantly cut down on those turnovers. But I think Trey Brown gets his 3rd pick of the year and a couple pass breakups. I'm looking for a really solid game from him going up against Dallas's secondary receivers, which are still pretty good targets for Dak Prescott. Now, let's get to the game predictions. And we've talked about what needs to happen for the Seahawks to win this game. We've talked about which players need to rise to the occasion for the Seahawks to have a chance to win this game. Now, the real question is, do they have a chance to win this game? They're coming into Thursday night's contest as a 9-point underdog. That seemed just about right to me with the way this offense in particular has been playing for the Seahawks over the past month. Do you see Thursday night being a game where maybe the Seahawks can surprisingly get right, or is this the wrong opponent at the wrong time for a team that just isn't playing good football?
Well, do they have a chance? Sure. They play this game 10 times. Seahawks maybe get 2 or 3 in there. But this is a tough task. The Seahawks are right in the middle of the gauntlet. They're crawling under the barbed wire in the mud. They're battered and bruised. Now they got to play a team that is really feeling themselves. In fact, I would consider them the Super Bowl favorite, not named the Eagles or the 49ers. who are the Vegas odds-on favorite. Oh, by the way, those are the next two opponents for the Seahawks. Oh my gosh! But yeah, the Seahawks are going through it, as they say right now, and without some major differences in turnovers, long explosive plays, I don't see how the Seahawks even really make it super competitive and compelling in the fourth quarter. I see a similar result as the 49ers game. I say 30-17, the Cowboys are going to win. And I might even be worse than that. Might even be, like, I don't know, 27-10 until some garbage time points or something like that. I think that the Cowboys are going to seek to take control early because the Seahawks, and I know what the Cowboys are probably saying. The Seahawks are one of those teams you can't let hang around in the fourth quarter. And the Cowboys are not interested in that. So I think the Cowboys do try and succeed in taking control early.
Week in, week out this season, I have constantly been playing the optimist card. I have been pressing that this offense is going to find this week. The offense is going to find it. I am to the point where I've exhausted that optimism. And going into this game, if the Seahawks were playing a lesser opponent, then maybe I would be able to find a little bit more positivity. But I just don't know how the Seahawks are going to keep Micah Parsons out of the backfield. I don't know how they're going to be able to have enough time to throw the football. And if they do, this is a very aggressive secondary. Geno has had his issues with throws that should have been picked off. He's almost thrown as many interceptions already this year as he had last year. I don't think all of that is on him, as we've talked about, but this just feels like a game where the Cowboys have all the advantages in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And I think the trenches are where games are won. The Seahawks are not a significantly better team. In fact, you would make an argument maybe the Cowboys have better skill talent across the board. And so it just feels like this is a game where talent is going to end up rising to the top. Maybe the Seahawks keep things interesting early. They have been a fast starting team up until last week, and then they've had their issues in the second half. I just don't see this being a game, though, that is overly competitive on the road. Dallas has played extremely well at home, winning margin above 25 points per game in Dallas. I just can't see the Seahawks hanging tough with them. And the way the offense is playing, unless they can find a groove finally. And again, my optimism on that front seems to have dried out to an extent. But I see this game being one where things are doubled up. And I think the Cowboys win this one fairly easily. This is an offense that can get rolling and put a lot of points on the board quick. Their defense can score points. I just don't think with where the Seahawks are at currently that this is a game that, barring a miracle where the Cowboys just don't play a good football game on both sides of the football, I just think it's going to be really hard for the Seahawks to have any shot to even cover that 9-point difference on the spread. As always, you can follow me on Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick on X at NickLee51. Make sure to subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, it's crossover Thursday on game day. I'll be joined by Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys, and we'll continue to take a deep dive into tomorrow night's primetime matchup. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and thanks for listening. Go Hawks.